The Cessna 182's engine had that good sound, the sound of 3,200 hours in the air, the sound of a machine that knew its business. Roy Hatcher knew that sound the way a carpenter knows the ring of a true nail strike. 23 years flying everything from crop dusters to medical transports, and the sound of a healthy engine was religion. He checked his instruments at 1842, right on schedule, altitude 4,500, heading 220, fuel good for another 3 hours easy. The Macara Strait spread out below him like hammered pewter in the failing light, that peculiar metallic sheen the ocean got at dusk when the sun had dropped but the stars hadn't taken over yet. He'd flown this route 60, maybe 70 times, Greyport to Seal Island and back, bringing mail and medicine to the 100-odd souls who refused to live anywhere civilized. Roy appreciated that refusal. He'd been married once, to a woman who wanted a house in the suburbs and a husband who came home at 5:30. She'd gotten her house. Someone else was coming home at 5:30. The radio crackled. Delta November 7, Greyport Control, how do you read? Greyport Control, this is Delta November 7, reading you 5x5. Roy's voice had that Midwest gravel, worn smooth by years of radio transmission, professional. Calm, the voice of a man who'd put a twin-engine beach down in a cornfield with one engine on fire and walked away to file his incident report. Roger, Delta November 7, be advised no traffic reported in your vicinity, weather's clear all the way to Seal. Copy that, Greyport. Should be on the ground in 45. Should be. Roy caught the first glimmer at 1906. His eyes were good, had to be, FAA medical every year, and he'd passed his last one with the vision of a man half his 48 years. The glimmer came from above and behind, visible in the rearview mirror he'd mounted on the windscreen despite the regulations. You saw more birds that way, more traffic, more everything. The glimmer resolved into lights. 4 of them, bright and greenish, brighter than stars had any business being, especially with twilight still clinging to the western horizon. Traffic, had to be. Greyport Control, Delta November 7. Go ahead, Delta November 7. Can you confirm traffic at my altitude or above? I've got lights at my 6 o'clock high, maybe 1,000 feet up. Pause. Roy listened to the static, that carrier wave hiss that meant the channel was open but nobody was talking. He'd heard that pause before. It was the pause of someone checking radar, checking flight plans, checking the board to make absolutely sure before they said something that would go in a report. Delta November 7, negative traffic in your area. Nearest aircraft is a commercial flight at flight level 25070 nautical miles north of your position. Roy looked at the mirror again. The lights were closer. Definitely closer. And they were moving wrong. Not the steady progress of an aircraft on a heading, but hovering, pacing, matching his speed exactly while maintaining that 1,000-foot altitude advantage. Greyport, I have visual confirmation of 4 lights. Definitely not stars. Definitely not Venus or, he stopped himself from saying, swamp gas, because that would have sounded crazy, and Roy Hatcher had never sounded crazy on the radio in 23 years. They're maintaining formation, bright green, very bright, no navigation lights I can identify. Delta November 7, can you describe the aircraft? Could he? Roy squinted at the mirror. The lights were brighter now, close enough that they were reflecting off his canopy. 4 points of green luminescence that hurt to look at directly, like staring at a welding arc. The shape behind them was wrong. That was the word that came to him. Not unusual or unfamiliar. Wrong. The way a reflection in a funhouse mirror is wrong, proportions stretched and compressed in ways that violated the basic geometry of manufactured objects. It looked almost as if the lights weren't attached to anything, just hanging in space in a configuration that suggested a structure without actually showing one. Greyport, I can't make out the aircraft itself, just the lights. They're not following any aircraft profile I recognize. Roger, Delta November 7. Are you requesting assistance? Was he? Roy's hand moved to the yoke, that automatic pilot's reflex when something wasn't right. The Cessna flew straight and true. Instruments all green, oil pressure good, fuel flow normal, engine temperature in the sweet spot. Everything was fine, except for the thing above him. "Negative, Grayport, just keep me on the line, will you?" "Standing by, Delta November 7. Roy watched the lights in the mirror. They pulsed now, a slow, rhythmic brightening and dimming that reminded him of breathing, or a heartbeat. Some kind of biological rhythm that made his hindbrain scream warnings his conscious mind was still processing. He'd flown through strange weather. He'd seen ball lightning once, over Kansas, a glowing sphere that had paced his Piper for 30 seconds before winking out. He'd seen sundogs and light pillars and atmospheric phenomena that had names in the FAA manual. This wasn't any of those things. This was watching him. The engine coughed. Roy's attention snapped to the instruments, RPM dropping, not much, 50 revs, 100, but dropping. He adjusted the mixture, checked the mags. Everything looked fine, but the engine coughed again. A rough hesitation that he felt in his bones more than heard over the engine noise. "Grayport, Delta November 7, I'm experiencing engine roughness." "Delta November 7, say again." "Engine's running rough, RPM fluctuating." He glanced at the mirror and his voice died in his throat. The lights had dropped. They were level with him now, maybe 500 feet off his right wing, and he could see them through the side window without the mirror. 4 green lights, arranged in a pattern that his eyes kept trying to interpret as a square but wasn't, not quite. The angles were wrong. The distances between them seemed to shift depending on where he looked, as if his perception was the problem, not the geometry itself. And behind the lights, defining itself by the way it blotted out the early stars, was a shape. "It's not an aircraft," Roy said, and heard the shake in his voice, the tremor that 23 years of professional composure couldn't quite suppress. "Delta November 7, repeat your last?" "Grayport, there's something off my right wing. It's not an aircraft. It's not any kind of aircraft. The shape is wrong. The lights are wrong. The way it moves is..." The Cessna jerked sideways. Not turbulence. Roy knew turbulence. This was force applied directly to the airframe, as if something had grabbed the plane and pulled. The yoke wrenched in his hands. Instruments spun, altimeter climbing, compass spinning through all points of the compass in 3 seconds flat, artificial horizon showing a dive while Roy's inner ear screamed that he was level. "Grayport, Grayport, I'm losing control. Something's got the aircraft." Static, pure static. The carrier wave was gone. He was shouting into dead air. Roy fought the controls. The Cessna was spinning now, or part of it was spinning, while another part held level, and that shouldn't be possible, but it was happening. The green lights filled his vision, pressed against the canopy like faces against glass. Except they weren't faces. They were something that wanted him to think they were lights when they were actually organs, sensory apparatus that perceived in ways his brain couldn't categorize. The engine screamed, not mechanical failure, screamed like a living thing in agony. The propeller was still turning, but the blades looked wrong, stretched, elongated, as if space itself was taffy near the thing outside. Roy's hands wouldn't leave the yoke. He wanted to let go, wanted to cover his head, wanted to do anything but sit there staring at what pressed against his window. But his hands were locked, frozen, and he realized with a clarity that came too late that the paralysis wasn't fear. Something was holding him there. Something wanted him to see. The green lights brightened until they were all he could see. Until the cockpit, the instruments, his own hands on the yoke, were just shadows in a universe of green radiance. He tried to close his eyes, but his eyelids wouldn't obey, and he saw. Depths, impossible depths, not distance but dimension. Layers of space stacked like pages in a book he was falling through, each layer a different physics, a different set of rules, where matter behaved according to principles that would require new mathematics to describe. Things moving in those depths, vast and ancient and curious in the way a biologist is curious about the bacteria in a petri dish, studying not out of malice but because study is what they do, what they've always done, moving through the spaces between spaces and occasionally brushing against realities like the way his wing might brush a cloud, and in brushing, in touching, in observing, they changed things. The way observation changes quantum states, collapsing possibilities into fixed outcomes, except the outcomes didn't align with human concepts of cause and effect, time and space, life and death. The green faded to white, then to nothing. Roy Hatcher was nowhere. Or everywhere. The distinction had stopped mattering. The Cessna fell, but falling implied direction, implied a fixed point of reference, implied that concepts like up and down still applied. The plane tumbled through something that was neither air nor water nor void, leaving no wake, making no sound, surrounded by a pressure that wasn't physical but still crushed, flattening 3 dimensions into something else, something the universe his plane had been built in couldn't accommodate. He tried to scream. His mouth opened, but his voice came out wrong, the sound waves propagating in directions that didn't exist, carrying not sound but meaning. Raw, unfiltered meaning that bypassed language and went straight to the part of consciousness that understood it was ending. Not death. Translation. From one state to another. From matter to data. From existence to observation. The last thing Roy felt was the sensation of being read. His neurons firing in patterns that something vast and incomprehensible was cataloging, storing, adding to a database of consciousness collected across gulfs of space and time that made the word infinite seem quaint. Then even that sensation faded. The Grayport control log shows the following. 1918 Delta November 7 reports engine roughness and visual contact with unidentified lights. 1923 Delta November 7 reports loss of control. Transmission becomes garbled, pilot's last clear words, "It's not an aircraft." 1924 transmission ends with 17 seconds of metallic scraping, followed by a sound audio engineers later describe as incompatible with known mechanical or natural sources. 1925 silence. The search lasted 3 weeks. Coast Guard, Navy, civilian volunteers. They covered 12,000 square miles of the Makara Strait with sonar, radar, and visual search. The water there was only 40 meters deep, crystal clear, mapped and charted and familiar. They found nothing. No debris, no oil slick, no personal effects, no emergency beacon activation. It was as if Delta November 7 had simply stopped existing at precisely 1924. The official report, filed 6 months later after the usual bureaucratic delays, concluded loss of aircraft due to unknown causes. Pilot error cannot be ruled out. Spatial disorientation in twilight conditions may have contributed. The radio transmission suggests the pilot was experiencing visual hallucinations, possibly due to hypoxia or carbon monoxide exposure. In the absence of physical evidence, the investigation is considered closed, pending discovery of wreckage. In the margins, in handwriting that didn't make it into the official document, someone, a junior controller who'd been on duty that night, wrote, "He said it wasn't an aircraft." He said it 3 times. And the thing is, listening to the tape, you can hear it, right before the static. Something else, something that sounds like it's trying to use his voice. But the words don't match his mouth movements on the CVR. How do I know that? Because sound travels, and the delay was wrong. Like whatever made that sound was farther away than his larynx, farther away than the cockpit, farther away than anything. That note was removed before publication. On Seal Island, the radio operator who'd been expecting Roy's landing call watched his empty approach path for 3 hours before calling it in. She was 72, a widow who'd lived on the island for 50 years. She'd seen strange things over the water, lights that moved wrong, shadows on clear days. Sounds that came from no direction. It got Roy, she told the Coast Guard investigator, a young man from Grayport who'd never seen the ocean at night from Seal Island's rocky shore. Same as it got the others. What others? He asked, pen poised over his notepad. She looked at him with eyes that had watched too many horizons. You don't keep records that go back far enough. But we do. Every 10 years, maybe 15, someone doesn't come back. Radio goes dead right about here. She pointed at a spot on his chart, latitude 41 degrees 16 S, longitude 173 degrees 42 E. And they're gone. Been happening since before planes. Used to be fishing boats. Before that, canoes. The old ones knew. They wouldn't go near that stretch of water after dark. What is it? The investigator asked, not quite believing but unable to shake the coldness spreading through his chest. Don't know what to call it, she said. But it's curious. And when something that big gets curious about something small, she shrugged. We're small, the investigator wrote it down. Then he crossed it out. Then he wrote it again. His report mentioned, quote, local superstition and folklore and psychological impact on isolated communities. He never flew after that. Took ferries when he had to cross water. Drove when he could. He never said why. 3 years later, another pilot reported green lights over the Makara Strait. A veteran, 14 years, experience, perfect safety record. The transmission lasted 90 seconds. The last words were, "It's not an aircraft." They didn't find her either. The lights are still out there. They're always out there, waiting for the curious. Waiting for anyone who flies through the spaces where dimensions press too close together, where reality's membrane is thin enough that something vast and patient and utterly alien can reach through and touch. And touching, it observes. And observing, it takes. Not out of malice, but because that's what it does. What it's always done. What it will keep doing as long as humans keep flying into the spaces between, into the thin places, into the dark. The sky isn't empty. And what fills it doesn't care that we think it's ours.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.